Last week we introduced higher order functions. In this video we'll give a couple of examples of decorators. Now let's just have a look at some examples of decorators. Now we've looked at these inner functions, so now we're looking at a function called example, and decorators are good at creating either checks or now to provide like pre and post conditions. So we're not going to go into decorators in detail here, but we're going to show a couple of examples, perhaps the easiest examples we've seen on the internet or other videos. So here we've got an example where we are going to divide one number by another. So let's say if we divide 5 by 2, let's just comment this out first if we can. No. Okay, so we've got example 5 divided by 2. So that gives us 2.5, which is fine. But what happens if we divide by 0? Then we get an error message, obviously. Now what we can do is we can create an outer function that checks to see if our divider is 0. So here we've got example, which is our function. We're going to put it inside check. So this, if you like, is our outer function check, and this has an inner function that checks to see if our divider, which is b, equals 0, and then it's going to print an error message saying can't divide by 0. So when we run this, you can see instead of getting an error message, it says can't divide by 0. So this is the simplest example of a decorator. Now the only thing that we could do to change this is that because this syntax is quite common, we actually have an alternative. We can put check. Now above our function example, we can put @check that will call the check function on example instead of using this syntax. So we run this. So the example with 5 divided by 0 calls the function, but now we have this decorator. That means that we can go to check, and now this code will check to see if it's divided by 0. So this is a simple example of a decorator. So that was our first example of a decorator. Now another example is a bit more complicated, so don't worry if this seems a bit more complex, but it gives an example of how we can use code that we've often used in previous videos. Here we've got 3 functions, method 1, method 2, method 3, and here we're going to repeat in these 3 functions, these are different ways to achieve the same task. So method 1, we're going to give it a number and it's going to create a list of ones of that size. Method 2 does the same thing, but it just uses a different approach, and the third approach uses a for loop. So we multiply a list of just the number 1 by, let's say, what's this, is 1 million. So 1 million, a list of size 1 million of just ones. We can use repeat, and we can use append in a for loop. Now what we want to do, we want to time these. So we create this decorator called timer. So we're going to time these 3 functions, and if we run this, you can see the different times we've got. We've multiplied it so it's easy to see which is the fastest, which is the first method. So how do we achieve this? Well, what we do is we can create this decorator that does something before and after, which is obviously the time. So here we have the default timer that we've used many times before, and we print the result. So this is code we've used before, but now we've put this in an inner function, and that's inside an outer function called timer. So what we've done is we've created a way of passing functions, method 1, 2 and 3, inside a function called timer that has an inner function that does the code we've used before. So don't worry too much about the detail of the code. Try to think of how we've used this before, that we've created different methods and we've timed them using start and stop. And now, rather than put the code before and after each method, which makes it quite complicated, we've put it in a function. And what we've done is we've made that a wrapper function before and after, and made that an inner function in this outer function called timer, which is a decorator. So you can see not so much how this code works, but more what you can do with a decorator. So we can call these functions, and when we call these functions, we've also used a decorator to time them. So this is an introduction to these higher order functions, and because they're functions that we've passed to another function, they're obviously a little bit more complex and complicated. But we've opened up a new world of Python code where we start to use the first class functions that we're used to, but now passing them to functions that makes them higher order, inner functions, encapsulation, closure and decorators. Wow, that's quite a lot for today.